Is this working? Oh my, I have no idea if this is what. Okay, I think it's working. I'm not expecting a lot of people, but let me just give it a few minutes for people to join. Let me know if you can hear me, because this is my first proper live stream where I'm sharing my screen and me at the same time, which is quite exciting. Do give me confirmation if you can hear me, it will really help. I've got my phone as well to see the live stream, just to double check. But I'm also not sure if there's a delay in me saying what I'm saying now, but then it's going back onto the stream like a bit later. Just double checking the settings. I guess I can't really do anything now. I'm using OBS for anyone that's an expert in streaming stuff. It was recommended to me. You can hear clean. Thank you. Thank you, Sunrise in the West. For some reason, I can't see the live chat on this setup, which is supposed to like have an easy integration with YouTube. That's sad. I can only see it on my phone. Am I able to do anything about that? Aha, I can see it now. It was like an extra window. Awesome. Oh, that's fun. Okay, this is my first time, as you can tell, and if you've been following the channel, I've not done anything like this before. Let's see, does it show? It doesn't show how many. Right, so I'm not expecting this to be a live stream full of loads of people. It's more so for me to have a creative way to make new content that suits my my lifestyle, because I haven't had the chance to record my next lectures, and I always have an ongoing list, and it's just such a shame because I want to be able to do it, but setting a dedicated time to research, script, film and upload is quite the pipeline soon. Yeah, so in this live stream I watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey in the cinemas. I watched it in IMAX. I am a big Christopher Nolan fan, but I'm not one of those people that are just biased, as I'm aware, to just hype up a film if it's just my favorite director for the sake of it. Like, if he does a bad film, then it's a bad film and I will be disappointed, but I will say it. I wouldn't just, join in the hype. I'd like to think I have my own opinions and views. I've never read The Odyssey. I actually forgot to bring my copy of The Odyssey that I've had for a good few years. It's this beautiful hardback cover, like a limited edition one. And it's got both the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I think I got it when it was announced that Christopher Nolan was going to do a film about it. I've not been introduced to the classics much growing up because I never went past English literature, GCSE, and English language. So I never did English for A-levels. I never really explored classics. I was very much a sci-fi girl and like detective, mystery, thriller type reader. And only like in my later ages, I say it like I've reached the end of my life, as in only in my as I got older, like in my mid-20s, that I've started to explore philosophy, enough for this channel, René Guénon, and etc. But I still wouldn't, I mean, I still wouldn't say I got introduced to the classics yet, even. I think when I think of the classics, I mean, I've read Pride and Prejudice, and I'm almost finishing Plato's The Republic. But they're not really classics. I'm not too sure what is defined as classics. And I guess this is the whole point of this live stream, because I want to learn more about the Odyssey beyond the film's adaptations. I've also got like a Reddit opened as well, because I want to like go through like the public opinions and stuff. I've got Google Gemini as well for quick research, and then of course just Google in general. You can see all my tabs, but it's okay. So yeah, I want to use this as like a study with me session to learn, and just put in your thoughts, opinions, etc. And for those that can't make it to the live, you can always watch it. That's one of the main reasons why I like the live stream idea for YouTube, because it's just live content that gets saved, and then it's something that I can deliver to you guys as well. And also it's essentially like a live free flow talk. All my free flow talks are in one take anyway, and so having it live doesn't really make a difference, so it's fun. Okay, I should turn my screen into like light mode, because I actually can't see in the sun right now. Let's see, system settings. I'm just going to quickly see if I can turn my browser into light mode, but I don't think it'll update, to be honest. Will it? No, it's still dark mode. Okay, well, I'm just going to put it there. Leave it as it is, because it's all good. Okay, so I guess my first question is, what is the definition of classics? Right? Okay, the study of ancient Greece and Rome. So I didn't know the classics was like tied to a specific area in the West. That's already something that I've learned. When I think of classics, I just had the assumption that it was something that is old and is like a pivotal literary statement in a culture. So like classics would apply to other countries and their classical texts. So I didn't think it would be just, oh, the study of ancient Greek and Roman. Now that I think about it, I think classics is such a generalized term that I don't know why it's associated with just one or two civilizations or one era, you know? Every country's got their own history and classics, right? So yeah, I'm thinking now, have I read anything ancient Greek and Roman? I mean, fun fact, I did participate in studying Latin for GCSE, and then I dropped out just before the exams. So for me, it only got as classical as that. Okay, so classics books. Let's see what comes up. Oh, that's weird, it just turned to blue. I'm just gonna put images and see. Okay, that's not gonna help at all. Oh, classic books are famous. So Pride and Prejudice, I haven't read Great Expectations. 1984 is on my list. So I guess there's like, there's multiple interpretations of classics. Classic books, right, okay. Books on classics. There we go. See if it's just a different thing. Right, great books on the ancient Greco-Roman classics. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so I've not actually read any of them. The Iliad, I've mentioned in a few of my videos, not got around to reading them. One thing I've noticed when reading Plato is, I don't know if I'm struggling a bit because I am reading a translation that is like structured too classical for me to read, and I need a more modern translation. That's something that I'm contemplating, of getting another copy of The Republic, maybe rereading it one day, or just finishing the last 3 books within that book. Because translations are very important, and I didn't understand the scope of how important they would be until reading Plato, because it's quite it's a very deep book already. He goes through so many concepts, so just understanding and digesting that kind of information is like a lot to begin with. But then when it's worded in a way where you have to sort of decipher that first to then understand, that's like a different step in the process. And so when I have all these steps that I feel like are just blocking me from understanding and processing the information instantly, I struggle a little bit with that. I think that's probably why I wasn't the best in English. I mean, I was in top sets, I was in top classes, but I was always just never getting the top grades. And so I don't know, maybe there's something about that. I'm digressing, but yeah, so that's why I think I may have avoided classics, because I just think, oh, they're worded in a way so poetic that I have to put in the mental effort to like decipher them, very much like English literature classes where we analyze a poem, and it's fun. I enjoyed that, you know, analyzing different interpretations and nuances and context within a book or a poem. But it would take a whole English class lesson to decipher and interpret like one section of a poem. Like there's endless, you know, paths to interpret these things. And so maybe I just subconsciously avoided reading classics. So yeah, back to the Odyssey. Okay, so already, I don't even use Reddit that much, to be honest, and already on my front page, the Odyssey is clearly a trending thing right now because of Christopher Nolan, as a, you know, world-renowned, internationally recognized director, and he is one of my favorites. I didn't expect him to do the Odyssey. He's always been very much science fiction, neuroscience, psychological thrillers type of, you know, writer. So the Odyssey was just a bit of a surprise to me. I was just like, oh, that's very classical. So yeah, I guess this is more of like a meme rather than, because like there's been a big debate on casting choices. So I guess that's something I want to just dive into straight, because a lot of people have strong opinions on the casting, and I'm not too sure where I fully sit on it. So there's an AI summary. Oh, okay, there's quite a lot here, but we're not in a rush. Right. Many felt having so many... Okay, so these are 4 major complaints. Okay, let's go through each of them. Many felt... Oh, by the way, I don't want to keep repeating this, but assume that this has spoilers because I'm talking about the film. If you haven't watched the film, then maybe, and you care about spoilers, then maybe this isn't the right time to watch this. Yeah, okay, let's get straight into it. Many felt having so many household names in this movie was incredibly distracting. Okay, I'm going to go into this post. Did the casting of the Odyssey not land for anyone else? Not to sound like a hater. Charlize Theron was the standout for me. That name sounds so familiar. Oh, Calypso. Okay. Interesting. I wouldn't have said she was a standout for me, even though she had an important role in the movie as Calypso. But anyways, Anne Hathaway grew on me as the film went on, but that's about it. Everyone else felt like modern movie stars dropped into ancient Greece rather than mythological figures. I kept waiting for that sense of gravitas you get from epics, and it never really came. At times, it almost felt like the script had been written around contemporary actors instead of letting the story breathe, which made parts of it feel a little rushed or even a little cheapened. I still enjoyed it overall. I'd probably give it a solid 3.5/4/5 stars, but man, it made me miss the Russell Crowe era of historical epics. Gladiator is such an iconic film in my like movie list. I will forever cherish that. There will never be another. Maybe it's unfair, but Matt Damon has never quite sold me as the larger-than-life heroic lead. Okay, I mean, because I'm talking about the Odyssey and my only exposure is to this film, I do feel like it's important to talk about the cast a little bit, and also it's my live stream, so I can talk about whatever I want. But I've never really been one to watch so many of Matt Damon's films for the sake of Matt Damon, but all the films that I've watched with him in it, including Good Will Hunting, you know, when he was really young, I just thought he's always given a good performance, and I genuinely believe like he delivered such a great performance as Odysseus in this film. I think it's not an easy character to portray, and if there are any criticisms of his character, that's due to the writing but not his deliverer of the character. Like, his performance in itself is commendable, and you really see the struggle, the stress, the contemplation, the self-denial. Like, that was so clear and evident in the film that I personally felt like I was going through that journey with him. Anne Hathaway, I think, is a great actress. Probably not my favorite. Like, she doesn't stand out to me, but I wouldn't say that she does not deserve her role as Odysseus' wife, Penelope, just because she is a staple in the Hollywood industry. I think bringing in Tom Holland is an incredible actor too. Like, it is an A-star cast, this film. Bringing in Tom Holland, I think, is a good call for Christopher Nolan to say, look, I'm a renowned director. I've always seen talent in these actors, so much that I reuse them, and all my films have been pretty much hit successes because of them. And I think bringing Tom Holland into that his cast playbook is a great decision. I think it gives him the opportunity to not be like deadlocked into just, oh, he's Spider-Man. I first watched him in The Impossible as well, so it's nice to see him in other roles. I haven't seen him in Uncharted, but it really shows that he's got a great career ahead of him. I just feel like he wasn't necessarily made for the role of Odysseus' son. Now, do forgive me, I forgot the name of Odysseus' son. Oh, Telemachus. Yeah. Okay, I did remember. Oh, was I wrong? Yeah, Telemachus. I feel like anyone could have. Let's get the cast up so we can see their faces. I feel like anyone could have done a great job of that role. It wasn't. He didn't bring anything uniquely special. Great performance, but yeah, like I said, it doesn't feel like, oh, that role was made for him and only he could do it. I felt like Matt Damon for Odysseus was kind of like made for it. I can't imagine anyone else doing it personally. Not that I have a great extensive list of Hollywood actors in my memory to pull other people out easily, but you know, from what I've gathered, I'd like to think I'm a film nerd enough to be like, yeah, I can't really imagine it. Tom Holland's role, Telemachus, it could have been anyone, but still delivered. Now, with this like A-star casting. Okay, I love Zendaya. I think she's a great personality. I don't know. I think a lot of people might disagree with me on this. I don't see much range in her like performances. She's always just this like skeptical, serious type role, and I guess some people can have their comfort roles, like Matthew McConaughey did at one point in his career, but then he wanted to break out of it and he did Interstellar. I genuinely felt like Zendaya didn't need to be in the film. It was very much like just cash grab name. I don't think she, like, her acting compared to like maybe Florence Pugh when she was brought in to Oppenheimer, I think it's personally a different league. But that doesn't mean I dislike her as an actress. I grew up watching Zendaya on Shake It Up on Disney. So like I've always been a fan of her, and she's super talented across music, dancing, modeling, and she's got such a lovely like behind the scenes interviews character. And personality from what we see, and I love her and Tom Holland, but I think having them both in the movie was kind of like, I don't know, from a casting choice was just kind of like a cash grab. And also like a tiny bit of nepotism maybe it could be suggested, because I think I watched an interview where Tom Holland was like, he got the role and stuff, and then it was almost like he asked, can Zendaya be in it? And Christopher Nolan might have been like, yeah, sure. That being said, something that stood out to me was when I watched the film was when we see statues of Athena, I actually did see the resemblance of Zendaya's facial structure as a good Athena visualization, regardless of if it's historically accurate. I kind of saw the resemblance, maybe because they just really dressed her up well, but seeing her in the scarf and like very little makeup, natural, and just kind of like, she's got this like brooding, feminine look to it. I kind of saw like as a figure, like she kind of resembled the statue of Athena to me. I don't know if that's the standardized statue. Let me actually Google this because I've got it here. So Athena, like how is she, because obviously this is all fictional as well, it's not like a real person. So that's why I don't fully disagree with, oh, I just clocked. They would have made the statue to look like Zendaya for the purpose of the film because it's not really a real person. For some reason, I just assumed that there is a standardized look for Athena that's been preserved over the years. I don't know my Greek mythology that much, to be honest. It's something that I would need to learn because I've always been more interested in Egyptian. But okay, yep, that makes sense. But that being said, I think she has quite strong, like, sharp features, like almost like masculine to some extent, that like it gave this like presence of something that men would carve and chisel on a statue, maybe. But I get it. I get both sides to the casting controversy, but let's I digress. Let's go back to this all-star cast, okay, so that's something I've learned. Let me just look at the comments. Hi Beck, how are you, my fellow polymath? I did like what they did with Odysseus' projection in the film. Yeah, me too, I agree. The controversy was about woke casting, forceful insertion of minorities, trans people, etc. I do agree with this criticism, but I think it's not remotely as important as subversion of the spirit. Somewhat I agree, but I don't think the common audience has the capacity as individuals to really hold in spirituality enough to be connected to the story in that way. Like, it is a consensus, like this film was made for the masses, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If it means the story gets shown to the masses in some way or another, I think it's better to have that reach than to not have that reach at all and have it like a specialized thing. But yeah, okay, so yes, the woke casting is one of the biggest controversies, which I'll get to, but I did see a lot of comments on the fact that it is like, oh, all cast, and it's not, Christopher Nolan's not paving the way for new actors to come that don't already have like, you know, a big reputation like Zendaya and stuff. Travis Scott being there was a bit random for me. I in my teenagehood, I used to listen to a lot of hip hop and rap, so like I grew up loving Travis Scott's music, and I think he's a great artist. Christopher Nolan saying about, let's bring it up. He said something about Travis Scott being a representative of like oral rap or something. Sorry, rap being a representative of oral poetry. Christopher Nolan had Travis Scott on the Tenet soundtrack, which I loved. I loved the feature song that Travis did, and I loved his vocals in the movie as well. I personally loved that. So it wouldn't have worked adding Travis Scott's vocals in the Odyssey soundtrack. So I guess he just found a way to kind of bring him in, and maybe Travis Scott wanted an entry into the movie industry, because I noticed a lot of singers and models are slowly converting into wanting that movie stardom and fame, because rap is modern oral poetry. Okay, so this is such an interconnected web of controversy, like with loads of people's opinions on this. Because rap is modern oral poetry, so that's clearly confirmed that Christopher Nolan wanted this to be a modern adaptation. And we see that in the film, because there's quite a lot of modern dialogue where instead of father, Tom Holland says, you know, that's my dad. And this is like, I get both sides, because a lot of people want a true adaptation to the culture that surrounded Homer to create the Odyssey. I completely get that. I get that too. But then I also get the side of, just like how I mentioned earlier in the live stream, I struggle to read older translations of classics or literature, religious texts, because I wasn't in that era to just read like that unless you decipher it. No one is like casually talking in Shakespearean language. It's just to understand it, decipher it from his era of art and literature. And then we have so many modern adaptations where the modern person can now understand what Shakespeare meant. And I think that's what Christopher Nolan's doing in this film with intention, and it's bringing the powerful story of the Odyssey into a platform where it will be understood. Kids nowadays say dad instead of father, so they won't really connect. Obviously, the film isn't for kids, especially with those two horror scenes. Well, a few of them were horror scenes for me, to be honest. But what I'm saying is, we don't connect with father anymore in our daily lives unless we're part of a family line that preserves a certain cultural tradition in how you speak, i.e. if you speak posh. But the average modern person doesn't, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just adapting to it. And so because we're using modern linguistics and dialogue in this film, naturally we're just going to connect to the story more and the characters more. So I want to defend that a bit, because I see it. I digress with the rap being modern oral poetry. I think it's a form of modern oral poetry. But you know what? I also like it. I know it can be seen as woke, but I liked his opening scene. I think he kept it quite, like Christopher Nolan still kept Travis's lines quite like classical, because he wasn't like rapping about degrading women and stunting and spending money and having loads of money and all that kind of stuff, right? So like, it's just, yeah, I mean, I get both sides, but I do come from a biased, I just saw the comment, hip hop is a deep rabbit hole. Maybe. I think every topic in this life is, to be honest. I do come from a bias because I've not been growing up reading classics. And I haven't read the Odyssey, and I still haven't. And so I'm not having an attachment to this story to really feel defensive about it. Maybe if I did, it would be a different story and I'll be saying different things. So I'm acknowledging that. But again, I don't see a problem with that. And I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, I grew up listening to Travis Scott. I've been a big fan of him and his music. So yeah. I don't know if that surprises people, because I like come across in this channel like a different persona, but this channel is an outlet for a part of my personality, not my entire personality, which I hope some of you guys, or all of you guys, understand and know that that is quite normal. Yeah, okay, let's go back now. Oh, anyone else in the cast? Elliot Page. So Christopher Nolan already had casted, was Ellen, was her name Ellen before? I think it was Ellen before. In Inception, and at the time she did a great role. Now, I'm not a massive like advocate, or I'm not proactive in the LGBTQ plus community, but I don't, like I think everyone should have their platform to raise what they believe in. And I'm not a hater of it as well. Like, I'm just very like neutral. Maybe it's something I can like look into, read into, but it's never really, other than pushing like trans ideologies on children before they actually grow up and understand what life is, to then make surgeries at such a young age. Disagree with that. But in terms of like adults making their own decisions, like it's again, that's like another thing. So there's a lot of controversy on having a trans actor on this as well. But I don't think having Elliot Page is a cash grab name. I genuinely think if it's anyone on this cast, it's Zendaya. I genuinely believe she didn't need to be there. Oh, and Helena of Troy. We'll get to that. Robert Pattinson, great actor. And I don't think he was a cash grab, because he was so good in Tenet. The problem is that masses will think, okay, so this is Odyssey, but it's not. Damon's Odysseus is not Homer's Odysseus. Way more people watch this than read the book, so it's rather depressing. Yeah, I get that. That's fair. But I guess my counteract to that is, so much of our history books have always been changed, and religious texts have always been adapted, and it's always been a new version for the masses to interpret to whatever agendas it suits. Like, I don't think this is just like a film media problem. I just think it's anything, literature, music, media, like anything media. And so I think people can connect to a story even if it's a different adaptation. And I think for those that would really care, would go and read Homer's Odyssey. And I'm one of those people, so I will go and read it. It's like, you can't shove a narrative or for people to, like, because if it was a traditional adaptation, realistically, the audience isn't going to be the mass public. It's going to be a select, like, classics, literature lovers, and it's just not going to sell well. Now, that's one effect, it's not going to sell well, but the second one is the metaphysics, the heart of the story, even if it's not a true adaptation, still wouldn't get reached to the masses. At least the story of the Odyssey is put across so many people of different backgrounds, whether they love Travis Scott, Zendaya, Tom Holland, all these different actors, whether they are black, white, brown, Greek, whatever, you know? It brings everyone together to the gist of the story is there. It's not a completely different adaptation. This wouldn't have reached out to them with the essence of that story if it wasn't modernized. So I understand the argument for that. Again, I personally would not pay to see it in IMAX of a book I haven't read, if it was a classical, traditional story with actors I didn't know and didn't really resonate with, because I haven't seen a lot of Greek actors in my view. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not saying it's necessarily a right thing or wrong thing. I'm just saying that, like, that's a different interpretation that a lot of people just don't realize. And I think with what I do with this YouTube channel, I try and make videos of different content, you know, mythology, science, religion, philosophy, spirituality. My aim is, in a way, to try and get that traditional perennialism, to get that core metaphysics that René Guénon talks about to the mass. Because if I make this a specialized channel, it's only just going to go to the people that are, yes, appreciating and loving that content, but then we're all going to just sit there and whinge and be like, oh, I wish more people knew about it. But you can't force those people to take it in a way that you can understand it and take it. So in a way, you have to adapt to then bring someone in. And if they really like it enough, they would stay. They would then read into things. They would research, just like how I'm doing this stream right now. I don't think I would have planned to read the Odyssey so soon if I didn't know that Christopher Nolan was going to announce and do this film. It would have been probably in my list, like maybe sometime when I'm 40 and I've read all the other books. Like, it wouldn't have been a priority for me. And that's similarly to what I try and do on this channel. Whether I do a great job of it or not, you know, that's a different story, but that's my argument for modernizing adaptations. Now, it might not be a very René Guénon thing to say, but I'm not trying to be like him, and I'm not trying to specialize into his work. I'm just trying to give a platform for the critical thinking that gives traditionalism and its metaphysics a spotlight, because I'm not seeing it elsewhere in a modern way, or, you know, as modern as I can be in my videos. You know, I'm not talking in old languages and, you know, posh ways of saying it, I guess. Especially when I was reading René Guénon's first book, the translation was just like it was a lot for me to just, it wasn't an easy read. Most philosophy books aren't, especially if you read older ones. Like, it's how it goes. So that's my first controversy closed. Kind of went off on so many like tangents, but that's the nature of these things. Okay, not enough Greek representation. Right. It's a movie about Matt Damon, who has memory issues and can fight well, and he hallucinates Zendaya during a political struggle. So it's Jason Bourne he's doing. I've not read or watched Jason Bourne, but I've heard really good things about it, and I do want to eventually watch it. But if you guys know me so far, I absolutely love Dune, and I'm so excited about Dune Messiah. Dune 3. That should be another video. Oh, that would be so good, like a live stream research into Dune lore. I may never end it. Anyways, this is the Odyssey we're focusing on. Homer's Odyssey likely had some critics saying it's not the original story. Yes, that's such a good point. Okay, so I've been seeing that as well. Like, throughout time, no critic has been like particularly happy with any of the adaptations. And I think even at the time, like, what was the reception? You know what, I'm just going to ask Gemini for this because it's quite a specific question. What was the reception of Homer's The Odyssey in its time? Give sources. I always pretty much say give sources when I use Gemini or any other AI stuff, because it's... Oh, that's quite a lot. Okay. Modernizing is not the problem. Oh wait, in Homer, Odysseus is a cool trickster, but ultimately serving gods. In Nolan's version, he's conflicted, boring, but also defying the gods. So the original would be more liked by people, not less. Okay, that's something I don't know because I haven't read the Odyssey, but I get that, like, having a different portrayal, a different character is not good. I get that. It is still fictional, and an adaptation is something, you know, the whole point of it is so that it's adapted. I'm not too sure what I think about that, to be honest. I'm kind of conflicted in both, just like he is in Nolan's version. I like the character development of defying the gods, though. It's a bit like in Dune, and I don't mean to always bring up Dune, but in the books, Chani is very much devoted to Paul, but they brought in Zendaya to have this, like, and a lot of, you know, traditionalist men will say, oh, it's like modern woke feminism, but I genuinely do like the take of her character's skepticism in the film. I really like that Villeneuve did that. And so, like I said, Homer's time of the Odyssey, the people were more religious and more in serving the gods. We live in a society now where people not necessarily defy the gods, but I think it's more challenge the gods. We've got a lot of, you know, religions out here. We've got a lot of comparative religions, clashes, wars, conflicts. But then we have areas of unity too, but then we have atheism as well. And neither is right or wrong, like, objectively. It's just, defying the gods, for me, is just really challenging the gods. And challenging the gods, for me, is just another synonym, loosely, for just being able to critically think rather than blindly following. And no one's really going to follow the story of main characters nowadays where they're just blindly following things. Otherwise it just feels like almost religious propaganda. I don't know. But again, I don't think it would have been more liked by people personally. It needs to be relatable internally. So, like, that conflict, inner conflict, the guilt, that is something that we all feel as humans. But also, I think the main takeaway for me that I feel like was Nolan's vision and intention was the fact, like, war is the greatest sin, the greatest act towards sin. It's like the worst thing you can do because it causes such travesty and, like, horrifying consequences. And I really liked that because I do believe in that. And we've lived in histories where war has been glorified and the patriarchy system, you know, idolizes and romanticizes men fighting for their country. And we do need defenders, yes, but I think it had gotten to a point where men were seen, much more then than now, disposable. And I disagree with that. I think men's lives matter just as much as women. And I think that's why there's not a massive push on, like, army stuff. I mean, there is now because of political tensions, but I mean the culture of, like, this patriarchal culture of, yeah, where am I going with this? I think I just went on a tangent, but yeah. Yeah, I've just gone on a tangent. Subversion of the message is the problem. Again, I think that's open to interpretation. I'm not saying you're wrong, I just think it's, like, your perception of what the message means to you will be different to a lot of readers. Like, you know how when you read a book, everyone's got their own interpretation. It will always be unique because it's how the story or the book makes them feel, along with their history, their subconscious mind, their childhood, developmental years, and their environment. All of that contributes into the way you think, whether we like to admit that or not. And so when we take on a story, you know, that's why people have different favorite films and stories, because it's what connects them to them. So I don't think in literature there is a like objective message that just doesn't get open to interpretation. That's the whole point of English literature studies. Like, it's the point that everyone can interpret differently, and that's what made classes so exciting when we would go into poetry and text and stuff. That's my take on it. I'm just splaying out ideas, but yeah. I think, imagine the movie where Satan is awesome and God's pathetic based on the Bible. Well, it would be rather subversive, no? The thing is, to some people that don't connect with the story, or they had taken the Bible in a completely different way, where they might feel sorry for the devil. And it's like, well, the devil represented critical thinking. Let's just say, I'm just giving an example. To the religious person, that would be seen as disrespectful and subversive because they just think a different way. I think it all comes down to just people thinking in different ways. So yeah. I don't think I've watched the Hitchcock films, Beck, but I think I'll enjoy the Bourne films. It's on my list. I don't really indulge in reading and watching films as much as I'd like to. I'm currently trying to get through One Piece. I'm almost catching up, but oh my god, I started that in like 2019. Anyways, we're digressing. Okay, the Odyssey. So what was the reception of Homer's The Odyssey in its time? I think for the live stream, I don't want to read all of that because it's like a lot of names that I cannot pronounce. So I'm just going to like summarize it into bullet points. So, because I just want to get a general overview. Right, so yes, the Odyssey is a poem and it would have been given orally. It was basically a textbook for education. Yeah, so you have people within the time of Homer's The Odyssey, you know, the era, that refrained and changed the adaptation of Odysseus from a clever hero into a shady, manipulative politician. So already that's different. Yeah, it's such a long anime, but I love it so much. Like, it's been a journey. Like, every time I've watched a bit of the story at different like times of my life, it's just been it's always like resonated with me, and I find lessons, and it's just comforting. Anyways, this is not a One Piece live stream, but maybe I'll do one. Yeah, so we've had people change adaptations, but if Christopher Nolan does it, it's a big crime. Historians have treated it as real history, attempting to separate actual events from mythical exaggeration. Lol. Okay, so Plato famously argued Homer should be banned from his ideal state because his stories corrupted the youth. Yes, I remember that in the Republic. I wasn't too sure why, because I still haven't read the Odyssey, clearly, obviously. So I wasn't too sure why, but I guess I would need to read it to really understand that. Or maybe I can ask, why would Plato have banned the Odyssey in his Republic? Let me just look at the rest. Yeah, I mean, it's just like any religious text and history books. Like, you've got the original edition, but then people just change it over time as well. So it's like, well, what is the original depiction? I'm assuming though that well, actually, have we preserved the original text of the Odyssey in Homer's intention and way? Because if it was oral tradition, like, did it get scribed? Okay, let me ask it like two questions in one. And how was Homer's The Odyssey preserved? Was it initially released through... I've watched Devil's Advocate. It's brilliant performance by Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves. Found it a bit scary, especially because like I was a bit more religious then, and so just seeing the depiction of like the devils and stuff like really creeped me out. I get what you're saying, selectivist, but at the same time, like the Odyssey isn't a religious text, and these religious texts are historic, you know, seen to be historical. What is it? Texts of things that really happened, allegedly, right? The Odyssey has always been a fictional, like it's been a fictional story. So, like, can subversion really exist for something that's fictional? Like, it's not a religious text. So that's my argument. Anything with Al Pacino yelling is great. Yeah, I fully agree with that. Least through oral associations. Okay, 2 questions I'm really interested to find out now. Homer was the foundation of Greek education. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did say that earlier on. Guardians, the rulers of the ideal. I do agree that children absorb stories long before they can develop critical reasoning, and it's not just stories, but it could be like religious indoctrination or cultural indoctrination, which has a big impact on you growing up. So the myths they consume must foster positive things, I guess. Yes, I remember this. I remember this in the Republic. So it's really interesting now that the Odyssey, my live stream on the Odyssey is tied in with me reading the Republic at the same time, because I can give some insights to this or just learn more. So yeah, so Plato did say that the gods are seen as petty, and they often somewhat do in mythology. They have almost human, like you can say, emotions, and they have jealousy and rage and like injustice as well. So having that depiction of an entity that is meant to be so powerful and shouldn't be bothered by these things really raises the question, like, is this really the role model we want to give children? I get that as well. And to Plato, God is by definition entirely good and unchangeable. I love that from a perennial standpoint, to be honest. So to show God's lying or sinning corrupts the youth into thinking human vice is divine. I agree with that. And so Odysseus is famous for being polytropous, so like a trickster, deceptive. Celebrating a hero who uses deceit to survive would encourage citizens to value dishonest cunning over truth. Bearing in mind this is a fictional story, yes, it's like the Brothers Grimm, right? Gory, horrifying stories that then got turned into something positive that has basically been the basis of a lot of Disney movies earlier on in, you know, Disney's growth. And it's had a positive effect on children. We criticize literature and books all the time. And at the end of the day, what you want to present to a mass audience, if there's something you really disagree with the way it's been told, and you have the platform to give a different interpretation or adapt it to a way that you think is going to be beneficial for society, then I cannot hate on Christopher Nolan for doing that. If people want the original, the best adaptation is just reading it and living it in your imagination as you read it. Like, you know, me growing up and reading all my favorite fictional stories, it's never, like, we're never satisfied with adaptations, right? Like, there's always something to critique because we had a vision of it in our imagination. I get it if the texts are obviously like completely different and we want true adaptations, but I don't know. The only hope some people will sit down and actually read the damn book. I think that's just, part of me just thinks that's just obtrusive to decide to, it's treating it like it's a religious book. It's not even a religious book, it's a fictional story. Okay, so it's known to be one of the greatest stories in history, and so you want to encourage people to read it. But there are different ways to do that. And if the fact that it's not popular right now in its original format clearly shows that like a lot of people aren't interested in it. Because we as a civilization, or just as a human race, have gone towards, just like Plato has said, like have gone towards thinking, well, what is better? What stories do we actually want? What stories do we feel like is going to serve a greater purpose? And I genuinely believe that's what Christopher Nolan was attempting to do. Whether it's right or wrong, like, I don't know, but I just think, you know what, fair play. I can't hate on it, to be honest. Plato hated that heroes in the Odyssey weep loudly over loss or fear, death. In Book 10, when Odysseus' men are turned into pigs, or when Odysseus weeps on Calypso's island, Plato sees a bad example. Guardians must be fearless in the face of death and master their emotions rather than giving to hysterical grief. This is interesting, unmanly emotions. So this is I think another great example in the sense of, well, if they won't read it, then there's nothing hopeful about the movie at all. Again, I disagree with that. I think, like, the movie serves a different adaptation with a different message that is just as important. Okay, it's not the original of the Odyssey or so close to the text, but it's using something that has been great for so long, and it's just critiquing, well, what do I want to bring out of it that I feel like will be better, a better message. It's just improving on the original story, so to speak. Like, that's how I see it. Like, as in, not that I'm saying it needs improving, because I haven't read it, but it can be seen that way. So yeah, so unmanly emotions, that's an interesting one, because this leads into a different debate topic, in the sense of social media giving a lot of people a platform to be soft, and essentially like men being softer these days, and to be stoic it can be seen as toxic, and men's mental health crisis is suffering because of this expectation in a growing, developing society where we are iterating, we are questioning and trying to do better things than our ancestors or previous generations have done. This will always be the case, whether it's life, politics, film, literature, media, like, this will always be the case. It's always going to happen. Plato has been living in an era where he wants to preserve that. Societies like men should be this, this and that, very strong patriarchal values. So I get that. Would I agree with that now? Well, we're clearly living in a different era, which is why I'm saying society is different to accept or reject older ideologies. I think because of the men's mental health crisis, I can't say that. Now, I think I don't have strong views for or against, in the sense of, I think it's important for both men and women to master their emotions in their own ways, given their own biologies, but understand that there should be different expectations. So for Plato to ban that, that was the societal expectation at its time. I think those expectations in today's society, it's changing. Like I said, it's the next improvement that our generations are heading towards. So there's a metaphysical limitation where obviously Plato introduces his famous theory of forms. And I guess, yeah, Homer practices imitation, mimesis. So it's twice removed from the truth because it's a fictional story. It's a fictional story. So, like, if you want to have kids grow up in, like, with figures to really look up towards, especially, you know, to believe in high power and God, you want to give a real story than a fictional story. Like, imagine your kids reading comic books and thinking that that is real, and so they want to be like, I don't know. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was Wolverine, but he's not a hero, he's an anti-hero. Be like Captain America, but the super soldier serum doesn't physically exist right now. So it's just like, it doesn't make sense to have a fictional story, right? So you would give maybe examples of great leaders, and you know, want to give that in the education system or whatever. That's why I think is the rationality behind not having the Odyssey as a, this is why I'm saying I think it's getting treated as a religious text. And what's really interesting was that the Odyssey was absolutely released orally. I have a great doubt in how texts have been preserved, both in religions and philosophy and just anything oral. It's just not. How do we even know that it's been preserved properly, that that was Homer's true intention? Imagine you wrote a completely different thing and we as the human race have just normalized, like, oh yeah, this is his interpretation. And surely that means that there are different versions of the Odyssey, just like there's different versions of the Bible or different translations of the Quran and like other religious texts. So did Homer write it himself? That could be the answer. Or did someone, or did other, okay. Did Homer write the Odyssey himself and then this was what was preserved, or did other people scribe? Okay, I think that's a fair question. But I do want to get off Gemini and move on. Okay. Homer almost certainly did not write down the Odyssey himself. Okay, so I guess this, like, for me, just overall right now, all this controversy on casting and interpretations of the Odyssey, for me, this just, like, kind of throws it out the window for me, in the sense of he didn't even write it down himself, so how do we know what his true interpretation, or sorry, his true intention was? And again, this is, I'm getting a bit passionate now, but this is exactly how I feel towards religious texts as well. This is not me being anti-religion, of course, like, I clearly respect it on my channel, but it's using your critical thinking skills and just kind of questioning it and just yeah. And then there's even the question of, did a single genius named Homer exist? He was an illiterate oral poet. Okay, so this sounds like, for me, people have treated Homer as a classic prophet, and the Odyssey has been treated like a religious text that must be preserved and be conveyed in a certain way. Like, that's like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was known to be illiterate, and then it's believed that he had the divine message and then could suddenly read and write and transcribe the Quran through God's channeling. Whether you believe that or not, you know, we weren't there, right, to fully confirm that. It has to be a belief. If Homer was seen to be an illiterate oral poet, and then he creates one of the greatest stories of history, perceived as that. Again, I'm reiterating, but that just sounds like it's been treated as a religious, like, people have tried to make a religious culture out of this whole thing. And so, yeah, classicists defending that. Did Homer even exist? Wow. So he definitely didn't write it, and then there's debate on whether he actually existed. And then other people scribing it down, like there's going to be human errors, there's going to be, during those eras, like ink getting spoiled or papers getting lost or degraded over time, like yeah. Even after the Odyssey was first written down, it did not instantly look like the 24-book text on bookstore shelves today. And of course, scholars at the Great Library of Alexandria in Egypt gathered copies. They removed lines added by overzealous performers, fixed errors. Like, this is such a human thing to do when politics gets involved, personal opinions, judgment, etc. So it's been transcribed by early scribes from something that was oral, because it was a tradition of oral poets, and then subsequently cleaned, edited, and preserved by centuries of Athenian and Alexandrian scholars who would have had their own motives at the time. Okay, yeah, so I'm not a massive like advocate for modernism. I share content on traditionalism, but I think this is a fictional story. Christopher Nolan is in the clear for me for his way of adaptating a story that clearly means a lot to him, enough to do a whole film on it, a big production for it. He has every right to do it, a fictional story in his own way that can be inspired by so-and-so. The Odyssey, like having the movie called The Odyssey because it's very much a direct inspiration to the Odyssey, but then saying, oh, but it's a different movie, a different adaptation, a different story to the original The Odyssey, when we don't even know what the original The Odyssey is. Yeah. That settles it for me personally. Like, I mean, there's only so much I can research into this, but I'm sure, like, it just makes sense to me logically. It really does. So let's go back into this then. What is your opinion on the Odyssey's casting controversy? Again, so I think this controversy still stands its own, like, regardless of, again, the story is fictional, but it was a story inspired by the Greeks at its time. I do understand the criticism that, like, if something is from your culture, you want people from your culture to represent it. I get that. I think that's fair. I get the need for that. If it was based on real people. Fictional stories have always been to the imagination. Now I know that characters that get written to look a certain way, and you read it and you have this interpretation, and then when they make a film or a TV show and it's like someone that looks completely different, there's this disheartening experience where it's like, oh, you can't even connect properly because you had such a vivid, like, you know, maybe blonde girl with blue eyes, you know, blonde white girl with blue eyes, and then you get a black actress. But why does, I don't know, why would that matter so much? Okay, I'm not asking this culturally. Culturally, I understand why this would offend people, I get that, but I mean visually, why would that matter? Because I know a lot of people that give this criticism. You can tell when someone's saying it because it's a visual difference and they don't like the visual difference, and then that stems from racism. So I think it's not an anti-woke. Yeah, I know, imagine Buddha being played by a Scottish man, just let that sink in. But Buddha is based on a historical figure that people believe was real. It's not a fictional character. So that gives room for creative adaptation. Again, I'm not defending, I'm not having a strong opinion for and against. I'm just trying to see both ways because, like I said, I understand the backlash for that as well. for this. I get it, Helen of Troy, if it's written as a certain way, if, you know, if I just read your comments, Selectivist, but I personally disagree. Whether he existed or not, I think is pretty relevant, because it means that there isn't an objective message of the book. If we question, sorry, of the poem, if we question that there are different versions of it, and if there have always been different versions of it, then there have always been different adaptations. Just because someone's taken a different adaptation that you personally don't like, it doesn't mean that this hasn't always been the case throughout time. And what you seem as subversive is ultimately subjective. And like I said, like if you've seen what I was scrolling through on, what is it, Gemini, like even within Homer's time, people were changing different characters, stories and elements that you would class as subversive, that like during that time. So it's always been a thing. Again, plays on with, well, what is the original? Anyways, where was I going? Yes, so yeah, one of the main reasons why I can sort of understand is if there is a story that is proudly written by people from my culture and they don't get much representation, and then all of a sudden, like, a completely different race portrays that. When I say it out loud, I think that's quite flattering. I think that's nice that a lot of people, like a different group of people, completely different to me. Like, you welcome foreigners you welcome tourists into your country to learn about your culture and participate. I think that's nice. Now, I think a lot of people bring in this, like, these conspiracy theories that, like, they're trying to rewrite culture and people. And I somewhat agree to that as well. So I'm genuinely conflicted by this. I don't have a strong opinion for either side. But I'm getting distracted by comments. Yeah, so Anne Boleyn as a historical figure, and they made her black. I completely disagree with that, because she's a real person. I just think for the Odyssey in particular, you know, for this live stream, I don't have a strong opinion that, oh, it has to be by Greek people. But what I'm trying to question myself is if it was stories from my culture that got adapted by a different group, race or civilization, as long as there's evidential credit towards the original sources, which obviously Christopher Nolan has done through the Odyssey. It's called the Odyssey, and everyone knows it's based off the Odyssey poem, to then lead people back to the original art. Then I think that's just sort of like the accreditate. I can't say the word, but him accrediting the original source. It's not like you're saying, oh, I've created this myself, and he clearly hasn't. You know what I mean? So if other people, but the thing is, throughout history, like, loads of white characters have played, like, historical figures, like Cleopatra. I think Angelina Jolie did that. And you know, historical figures and fictional characters. And that wasn't seen as a problem then. But when the opposite happens, then it's like suddenly it's wokeism, and it's like a big thing. Now, I'm not anti-woke and I'm not pro-woke, because there's just so much nuance to this. So that's what I'm questioning. But yeah, if other people decided to do a story from my culture and they get credit, that's fine to me. I think that's flattering. I think that's nice. And it's a different perspective, and I get to see that. It's only if they say, oh, we're adapting this, we're taking this story and we're making it our own, and in a way colonized, that's when I would have a problem with it. Okay, so some people might watch that content and think, oh, that's how it is, and it's owned by the people, those races, and it's not from my culture, they won't associate it. But that's where it's important, where credit should be due. I don't think Christopher Nolan had to explicitly give credit for the Odyssey. Like, in this scenario, for this live stream, I don't think, like, it's clearly clearly about the Odyssey. If it was like specific things, specific cultures or stories, you know, that not everyone knows about, then give credit, just like with art or any other media or literature. So I get that. If it's a historical figure, I think that's wrong, because then it's seen as rewriting history, wiping out. But the thing is, though, that's always been the case throughout history. Like, if you think your education system of your country hasn't put biases in their historical figures, whether how they're interpreted or not physically, like, nothing is ever truly preserved. It's like Plato said, mimesis, if I've pronounced it right, it's imitations of imitations. Like, that's always going to be the case. There are no different versions, but there clearly is different versions of the Odyssey, because people have adapted it like different times. And if it's been recorded, again, if you've heard what I said before, if it's been recorded orally and Homer didn't even write it himself, then everyone that has scribed the Odyssey is going to have their human interpretations and motivations behind that version. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about this more because I feel like I've said my points on that. I'm just reading your comments. Sunrise in the West. I just don't know how to pronounce those names. Were both held until after the First World War to be great men rather than culture weaklings. What one generation values as heroic, a later era may view as cultural obstacle. Yeah, I think this is a very important quote, because when you look back at historical figures, and I'm just going to think about like maybe in the World War, and I'm taking it from the point of view of British history. I grew up in school where Winston Churchill was idolised. Now, I don't know that much about him, so I'm not trying to make a massive comment, but historical figures like him, for the British education system, education was handed to British schools to glorify the British side in the World War, and every country is going to have their own version of that. And so Winston Churchill might have been a heroic figure to many white British English men growing up in the generation. Now that I have not read this evidence, so I can't claim that, but now that I've seen that there's been loads of evidence apparently of Winston Churchill's, like, you know, not actually being a romanticized historic figure, it's just like, wow, are we just going to accept that, or are we going to question it? Again, back to this ideology of critical thinking. Like, are we just going to accept things blindly, or are we going to criticize it? And then, yes, is this a cultural obstacle? Should we continue glorifying, you know, values that are heroic, or is it seen as damaging to society? Men's suicidal rates have gone up, like, probably I don't even know how well, like, it's still have been a case, but just not documented in previous generations, right? But arguably, men in today's society have become softer. But maybe because it's coming to light that we're critiquing how men should deal with things and whether it's always been a toxic thing. Like, generation to generation, we always look back at the previous generations, and then we will think, well, what's affecting me now? I'm having the critical thinking skills to question this. So maybe this is an obstacle that we need to get through and remove. Think about how much damage, you know, like women's rights have been before. And I'm not like modern feminist to the extent where like I like to separate and make men and women hate each other. I'm not that kind of like modern like feminist. Maybe it's more prevalent in the UK and America, that stereotype. I do see union in them from a traditional perspective, but I do also agree that over time, like, you know, women didn't have as many rights and freedom as they do now, but it's still like there's still room to improve, like we haven't solved it. But then I also saw United Nations, like, I don't know if this is true actually, but United Nations confirmed like a regression of women's rights like globally. I don't know if that's true. Yeah, so confirmed a global regression in women's rights driven by rising conflicts, democratic backsliding, and an organised pushback against gender equality. And I think in my position as a woman, that I just don't think this is something to just let it slide. So I'm not deviating. I am going on and on about my perception on this quote, but I really see value in that, and I think it's just being sensible about it. Like, you just have to adapt. Like, it's the whole point of evolution, and if we're doing that biologically, since what we know is the dawn of time for the human race and survival of the fittest, if we have to go there, that also includes mental, psychological, sociological like impacts as well. Again, I'm not saying these things dictating it like I'm always right and I'm the person to say it. I'm just sharing my views, and I think it makes sense to me. And yeah. About historical reliability, some literature have almost nothing beside it to prove it, but other literature texts have an overwhelming oeuvre to prove that it has happened. Sorry, let me see if I interpreted this right. Some literature almost... Yeah, this is the thing, like, I'm assuming I interpreted this right, but if it's a fictional story, it's not like it was real and that it happened. So why do some literature texts get, like I've mentioned before earlier in this stream, it's treated as a religious text when it's not, and it didn't really happen. And fictional literature has always been open to interpretation, because the human mind has always, to a large extent, been subjective. Like I said, everyone comes from different backgrounds and different biological makeups, environments, psychological effects as well. We will all have a unique interpretation of something. Yes, there will most likely, this is where probability and statistics come, where a large group of people might share the same belief. That's the whole point of like following religion, or having groups of people having similar interests and hobbies and blah, blah, blah. But it's still a unique interpretation to you as a human soul. So it's just like, that's how I see literature. That's how I've always seen literature. But again, like, I guess, yeah, this is like a long deviation of like the casting controversy. And I've also seen, actually, let me type this. Was it Homer himself, or I'm going to write this because I don't know how to formulate it into an actual web search. I've seen posts about Homer himself or other people in his era seeing black Africans as the beauty standard, not the beauty standard, but as something so different that it was seen as beautiful, potentially the Ethiopians. Just seeing a new comment here. Ethiopians. Yes, there's a trend against Churchill. I'm not fully like that aware about the trend, except for it's just come to my attention and I'm using it as an example. I'm not saying in this scenario it's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is it's not necessarily a new story. It's essentially there's new evidence to then give a truer light to the original story, right? Like, as you get more evidence in a detective's case, like, you're going to try and catch the criminal no matter whether you were rooting for one of your suspects to be the criminal or not. Like, the truth is the truth. And so everyone is entitled to form opinions and exercise their critical thinking skills of like, well, was Churchill really the man that, you know, was romanticized at the time? And yet, just because it's a trend, something's trending, it doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. A lot of people like are adverse to trends because they want to be seen different, not join the main crowd. But like sometimes some trends have like a merit of why they're trending in the first place. And obviously that this is something you'd use your critical thinking skills to think, well, is this trend something that I agree with or not, or want to participate in or not? And that's each to their own. But regardless of if something's trending or not, I think that's, I don't want to say a derogatory way, but I think I'm reading it as that's you saying trend is like a putting it down kind of thing. But I just think, you know, with a more open mind, it's just like, well, why is it trending? And also, like, have you done the research to really look into this properly? A lot of people as well, I've noticed on comments on YouTube, will be like, oh, if you really research this, I'm paraphrasing, but like, oh, if you really research this, you would have the same opinion as me. But like, everyone's open to different, like the whole point of research and collective research is that everyone brings their opinions to then get closer to the truth, right? So, you know, for something like Churchill to have been a trend, I think is a good thing, because it's getting more people to actively research and then actually be like, hold up, you know, why is the truth? That's moral relativism, something your channel is against. I've not stated that my channel is against anything. So again, if that's your interpretation, that my channel's been against anything, like it's not in my description. I don't think I've said it verbally either. So yeah, again, this is what I'm saying. Even my videos, any form of media just has, everyone's got their own interpretation and bias that they want it to be a certain way. If my channels come across that way, like I cannot be in control of that. I'm aware that that will have its own consequences with my viewers. And I don't mean consequences like a bad thing, I'm just saying like an effect. Then like I'm still going to put out content, because the whole point of my channel is to encourage critical thinking and to encourage seeing connections. So yeah, I've never said it's against anything. I criticize modernity and modernism, but I will criticize religious texts or just like anything that comes across my way. It's the pursuit of wisdom. And I've always expressed that wisdom is, it's not an objective thing. It's just an evolutionary thing that everyone has the opportunity to exercise within their lifetime. And I just see it as a moral responsibility. Not that everyone's going to come to a conclusion that is objective and everyone's going to reach the same conclusion, right? It's just gonna be different. And I just encourage critical thinking skills in a positive way and in a respectful way. So yeah. Thank you, Sunrise in the West. I appreciate your comment. That's very sweet. Okay, back to the Odyssey. So I've seen posts about Homer himself or other people in his era seeing Black Africans as something so different that it was seen as beautiful, potentially the Ethiopians. Yeah. Aha. So Ethiopians, Black Africans, were held in exceptionally high regard, often idealized as the most beautiful, pious, and favored people on the earth. So before I read the rest of this, I don't think Christopher Nolan is a dumb man. He did not get to where he is being dumb and just researching loosely. I genuinely believe every decision of his is so intentional because he's meticulous about his craft and art. Whether you agree with that or not, that's a different thing. What I'm saying is, I think there is merit to the research that he goes in. Intentionally casting a Black actress for Helen of Troy, where the idea of her is meant to be focused more about her beauty that men went to war for, isn't that the metaphysical message rather than anything to do with historical accuracy, even though she wasn't a real figure? Again, I understand when, you know, using Black actors, there's a theme of using Black actors to replace historical figures, in adaptations. That's completely different, and I disagree. I think that you should use actors that, you know, resemble and come from that culture. I think it's nice representation. Representation matters. This is a fictional story, I reiterate. And I think the fact that there is clear research as well, where Ethiopians in particular were seen as like beautiful and pious, and there's a big discourse on this. Having a black actress, okay, maybe is Lupita Ethiopian if we have to be specific, because loads of people just want the biggest, what's her ethnicity? Does it really matter? But, you know, I'm just curious. Oh, okay, she's Kenyan. But the thing is, even so, like, I just asked that of curiosity. That's not necessarily like me criticizing or anything like that. The physicality of, I mean, I guess if you want to nitpick, do Ethiopians have specific features? But then just, that again, it's the message of Helen of Troy, sorry, her character. So again, if you see, I'm just responding to selectivists, if you see it that way, like, you see it that way, but I disagree. I'm not trying to act pure or anything, like, I'm just, again, if something makes sense to me, I will voice it out and say it, like, that's my take on it. But anyways, so Helen of Troy, the woman that men went to war for her beauty, that's kind of her role as the character, from what I've seen in the film and from what I've seen on online discourse. I think that was quite, I'm assuming that this was very intentional of Christopher Nolan, and I love that, because this is deep research that the average person, even the average person that has read the Odyssey, would not know, because in the West, study of the classics, especially in Europe, are in such a bubbled environment. This is my interpretation, and I think this is something that René Guénon kind of says in the introduction of the study of the Hindu doctrines, like, it's in such a bubble that, like, they will only interpret classics and Eastern traditions as well as, sorry, Western traditions as well as the East in their own way of thinking. I've lost my train of thought of where I was going with this. So, like, I think I'm just making an assumption. A part of me believes that the Odyssey reader, especially, not even especially, including people that have studied the classics and are in this bubble, have not researched deeply enough to know this discourse about Black Africans being seen as out of this world and pious and pure and favoured people on earth. That is exactly the description that you would associate with Helen of Troy and the idea of men going to war for her. And another point I think is worth raising is, and this is something that I can relate to in the sense of being a minority in an environment where everyone has the same similar ethnic features and it's the beauty standard. And for me, being like, you know, a brown girl in essentially like a dominant white area, my perception, people's perception of my face, my beauty could either be seen as she's so different, she essentially looks ugly, or she's so different, she looks beautiful because she's different. Both interpretations still are based on the fact of looking different, right? And so I kind of get that during the Greeks' time, something so different can also be seen as something incredibly beautiful. And I've just seen a comment about the Queen of Sheba from the Bible was likely Ethiopian, and Solomon wrote poems about her. I can't verify that, but I think I'm familiar with the idea of that being true. Exactly, like, at the end of the day, like, this is open to interpretation. We are all guilty of this, and sometimes it's not necessarily something to be guilty of as well, like, it's just personal. I I think that's one, it can be seen as something to be guilty of or something to see beauty in, right? So yeah. But again, like, for physical beauty and stature, like, oh, that's very interesting. King Memnon of Ethiopia brings an army to aid Troy. Memnon is described as a warrior of extraordinary beauty, second only to Achilles himself, and a heroic figure respected by Trojans and Greeks alike. And that's a published literature review, ResearchGate. So let's open. Can I open that? Yeah. So this is fascinating to me because I always find beauty perceptions an interesting topic. And modern racial prejudice did not exist in ancient Greek, okay? To the ancient Greeks, humanity was not divided by skin tone, but rather by culture versus barbarism. Which, that makes sense to me. Yes, okay, interesting. So to look exotic, okay. So what is different is seen as exotic. And I feel like as growing up in a community where I was a minority, I've experienced both the modern way of like rejection, which I think is a story, a trend that gets passed as like, this is the stereotype on these people, not pretty, oh, they're so different, they're ugly, whatever, reject. Or maybe racial prejudice in culture and religion, and they associate with that being ugly and then reject, right? But if that wasn't the case, then I have experienced where I've been seen as exotic, quite literally from white men. So like, I've experienced both ends, and again, something that is so different can also be seen as beautiful. And I think it's nice that the Greeks saw that. And yeah, I think that's wonderful. And it's been documented by a prominent classicist that in ancient Greek and Roman literature, it contains no evidence of anti-black racism. So in a way, having Helen of Troy be a black woman, and not for the sake of wokeism, but for the sake of historically accurate like research, the Greeks would have wanted Helen of Troy to be black, because they saw that as pure, ethereal, beautiful, exotic, and they did not have evidence of anti-black racism. So now, when I was reading posts on, oh, they cast a black woman for Helen of Troy, she's supposed to be blonde hair and blue eyes. First of all, we don't even know if Homer fully existed. Second of all, we don't know if his original, the Odyssey, has been fully preserved. And third of all, there's evidence that the Greeks and Romans were not anti-black, and they loved and saw black people as a beautiful race. So to me, I was almost leaning on because of the trending of public hate, of woke hate, anti-woke hate, sorry. Because whilst people think leftist woke is trending, I think that's like, you're just the opposite end, but I also see anti-woke rightist trending as well. Like, if you come from a bird's eye view, you will actually realize like both are rising depending on what echo chamber you are in the internet, which I think is really important. So yeah, there is, I just read your comment Sunrise in the West. There is something to this idea of exoticism, and I think it can be a close line to having a fetish, which is like weird and wrong, but again, that's another debate. But I think exoticism can be a form of appreciation of something different, and I think that is very beautiful, and like you said, it's flattering. So I can now defend, through what I've learned in this live stream so far, that actually Helen of Troy being casted as a black woman was a right thing to do, and it was historically accurate. And a homage to Greek culture, because right now I'm having such a positive like view of the Greek people, the ancient Greek people and Roman people, that it's like, oh, that's actually quite nice that they saw it that way. So if anything, because I did this research and I overlooked this trend of, oh, you know, Helen of Troy being black and anti-woke and the conspiracy theory of rewriting history, blah, 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 on a fictional story, I reiterate again, I now have a bit of respect for the ancient Greek and Roman for this particular view. And I think it's quite honourable to have portrayed that. I think we can close this then, right? Because then, to me, that makes sense. It is racist to just reject that, you know? Wow, that's genuinely something that I've learned and I did not know. Incredible. So this leads on to something that I noticed in the film. I haven't really talked much about the story of the film, and I'm almost 2 hours in, but there was a scene where Himesh Patel basically says, well, the Greeks, and I think there's a black man, that's one of his person, what's the term I'm looking for? Soldier, mate, comrade? What's the right term? Anyways. And they're saying we're the Greeks, and they're representing the Greeks in that film. And I felt a bit uncomfortable because I'm having the right-wing views coming in where it's like, oh, but they're not Greek. And they're saying that, and it's like, oh, that's not historically accurate. And I agree if that is the case. So this is something I want to question, because I've seen posts where people were saying the Greeks weren't white, the ancient Greeks were white. I'm just going to use Google right now. Okay. Wow, okay. Both men and women are usually depicted with low foreheads, thick curly hair, almost always black or dark brown, straight noses, large eyes. Did the ancient Greeks look like modern Greeks? Now this is important, because that's like saying Moroccans now, through Arab colonialization, look like Moroccans back then. It's a different like race that's kind of like merged in. For example, like in North Africans and stuff, there are loads of tribes that, you know, we still have descendants of living today, but in terms of the overall civilization right now, the society of those countries right now, the people, the population, because a large part of colonialism affected that, like, a lot of them will look different over time. That's going to be the case for a lot of populations, a lot of countries, civilizations, whatever. That's how it is now, because those are the effects of history. So, interesting. I'm going to click into this. Beyond the Mediterranean stereotype of dark hair, brown eyes, and olive skin, the ancient Greeks were more diverse in appearance than you might think. Like I said, I'm a massive fan of Christopher Nolan. There's a part of me that's going to have some bias that I can't fully subconsciously get out of my head, but I'm trying to be as rational and try and exercise my critical thinking skills out of my own responsibility. I genuinely think he's a man that would have done meticulous research. This is a man that doesn't own a phone and is like, I think he just has one computer in his house and he just uses that to research, and it's very like old school and uses like traditional cameras because he's so passionate about film. Like, I don't think it's the type to enter in woke ideologies for the sake of woke. Again, I can't speak for him, but I don't think he would have done a full dishonor to his own research. That doesn't mean it has to be like meticulously like the same as the original, because the whole point of an adaptation is that it's adapted, but interesting. Topic of ethnicity and racial identity. So it's been an ongoing discussion of, well, this fascination of, well, what did they look like? And there will be genetic overlaps, agree. Modern Greeks are quite diverse in appearance, including those with much fairer colouring. Again, could that be European colonialism, like, in a way of, like, I don't know. Curly hair as well, like, isn't that normally associated with, like, darker, like, people with darker tones? And I mean, white people can have curly hair too, but I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. In similar fashion to earlier Bronze Age art, women often appear as fair-skinned, while men often appear in darker hues or completely black. Okay, well, this still doesn't confirm for me if, like, what Greeks actually look like. Let's go into images. See, this man right here, that is not a white man with, like, blonde hair and blue eyes. Just pointing that out there. And to be honest, like, just want to put it out there, like, some people of Indian, like, of the, like, subcontinent Indian race, like, in some lights, it can be, like, ambiguously, like those features can be prominent, but I don't know. Again, I'm still researching right now. I'm not too sure where I fully stand with this. I'm gonna ask, what did the ancient... My mic is closer. Are you guys having trouble hearing me? Let me know. I can switch. I've got another mic as well. I'm gonna change mic because that one's running low battery and this one's got more battery. Can you hear me, guys? Do confirm. I mean, the sound visual thingy is moving when I tap on this. Sorry if you're wearing headphones and that that's a bit intrusive. Okay. Right. So predominantly olive skin. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Modern Southern Europeans. Okay. It's like there's a discourse where, like, South Asian men and women can sometimes get confused. Like, I've been confused. Like, some people have thought I have assumed that I might be Spanish. So there's, like, a discourse between, like, similar genetics and, like, similar, like, cultures and food inspiration between, like, Latin, Hispanic, mainly Latin America side, and have that in comparison with South Asian as well. And in terms of features and facial features, especially if you're just olive brown skin tone and you're a man and you have, like, facial hair and, like, you know, different but similar, like, nose structures compared to European, like, standards of, like, nose structures and stuff. I don't have a strong opinion for or against that. It's just something that I've seen. Okay, so this is, like, body stuff. So dark hair was dark hair was the standard. So it makes sense that there aren't any blonde people predominantly, like, shown in the film. But, oh, lighter hair, okay, it's golden. Was attributed to heroic or divine figures. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so light hair for Athena, and they casted Zendaya, so technically that's not an accurate depiction, so that is fair. That is fair. but also this is a mythological, like fictional god as well. But again, I truly don't think Zendaya was the right casting for Athena, so I get that. But in terms of like Himesh Patel and stuff, like that is more of an open casting where I don't know if I can strongly defend or debate on this still. I'm not, I mean, I'm skim reading this, but reddish brown tan skin. Tell me in terms of skin color and facial features. This is the thing though, because of people traveling now, interracial marriages and cultures, colonialism in history, like, I just feel like sometimes, like, yes, okay, like, Indian people are going to be mainly brown. Chinese people are mainly going to have this, like, hue, like, warm, like, yellow hue in their skin. Ethnically English people are going to have white skin. Like, I get that, but I feel like in Europe in particular, there's more ambiguity in, like, what is the standard way that Italians look, for example. I know, like, from posts and stuff and just media representations, is that the right word? Like, Italians have, like, distinct noses or something like that. I don't know if that's a racial, like, a negative thing that's been said by maybe the English or something like that. But even then, like, I could never fully like distinguish between Europeans, but I also understand if Europeans can't fully distinguish between, like, South Asian features and cultures as well. So I think it's just like a lack of awareness and exposure for me, and I don't really criticize that too much. But I'm still not really understanding, because yes, sun exposure is different because men were outside more. I get that. Or the Levant. So yeah, Arab people do have, like, features today do overlap with, like, Mediterranean and some European features as well, to be honest. I guess what I want to ask directly is, I think Gemini will kind of give a leftist type answer on this, maybe, because obviously they're trained and they're guardrail to say that, but I think I'm curious to ask this live. Was casting Himesh Patel to represent... Oh, was casting Himesh Patel to represent a Greek and an accurate decision? Oh my gosh, that is a great... Okay, so before I even get to that point, I'm just reading Skijet JC. Have I read your username right? I'm going to read it out loud just in case. I can't remember if I've got live chat replay on this stream, but this is something me and my sister discussed about, but not as directly as you've said it. But it's a very important point. So my interpretation of Zendaya as Athena is likely wrong, but I took it as it wasn't actually Athena. The statue of Athena in the movie was clearly not like Zendaya, but it was Odysseus's guilt of killing of the Trojans, men and women. His guilt just manifested that Trojan woman as Athena. So that woman in particular. This is what I love about media, literature and art. It's open to interpretations, right? And it's so nuanced, because I see truth to that interpretation as well, because he just picked so Odysseus in the film sees a random woman essentially get executed. He feels guilt for causing the events to lead that, or at least participating, and because she was seen as a worshipper, she died in Athena's temple. She was clearly a worshipper of Athena. he then associated that face with his guilt, or what is it, shame, and possibly a bit of fear in how he thinks Athena would have reacted. And so like his belief of Athena as a god anyway just had Zendaya's face, or that woman's face representing it, to haunt him. And it's a subconscious thing, which I'm really glad you brought that up, because I didn't, that went past my mind, even though I lightly touched upon it with my sister. And again, I think that's very clever of Christopher Nolan. And if we look back at his previous films, if you have seen Memento and Inception, Christopher Nolan is a man that is very intricate in the subconscious mind, very like almost Jungian about it, although I wouldn't take my words as the Bible here, in the sense of like, I'm just saying that right now. But again, this is a man that has done meticulous research into bringing these unique ideas into his previous films. It makes sense. It is possible for someone to have a PTSD of something, and whatever they have physically seen happens to be a subconscious representation of something that they fear or have guilt or whatever, right? Like, the subconscious mind is such a powerful, unexplainable mechanism. Sorry, not mechanism. Entity. Is that the right word? Thing that has so many intricate mechanisms that we just cannot fathom. Oh, thanks. Thanks. They're quite bad, but I'm not really a nail person. But anyways, I just got distracted. Yeah, and so that is a realistic, I don't even want to say modern, because that's seen as a negative thing right now, but science has over time shown effects of PTSD and are still studying them, but that seems like a pretty standard effect of PTSD for me. That is something that the modern audience can relate to. And the fact that Skijet has raised that as his interpretation is such a wonderful example of how there are nuances and different interpretations to this one film, to this one story. And it's not wrong, and it's not objectively right, because that's what interpretations are based for. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So now do I think Zendaya was the right casting choice? Do I go back on what I've said because this has been raised? I guess it doesn't matter if Athena, because it's like when you're reading a book. When you're reading a book and the author intentionally writes in this first character of whatever his character is, but then it's like the first character's perception is corrupted or biased towards the story, and you as a reader question like, oh, was this turn of events really real? A good example of this is a book my sister introduced to me, and it's going to bug me. I think Ralph Fiennes portrayed this. He was in the film adaptation. Oh, what's the book about? It's bugging me that I don't understand. I don't remember the name. What's the book about? A man being pursued by a religious man and atheist. It's quite a... No, okay, maybe I shouldn't put atheist. In love with him and is stalked. It's literally gonna bug me. Enduring Love, okay. And you read up and it's like, was this okay? Let me give the context. Okay, so Enduring Love is essentially, I guess it's a little bit of spoilers to be honest, but basically Joe meets a guy called Jed after a tragic hot air balloon accident, And throughout the story, Jed stalks and is obsessed with Joe, essentially like in love with him, and tries to use religion as like his devotion to him in a way. It's a pretty good book, and like he believes that he shares essentially this profound divine romantic connection. And then this has a conflict on Jed's personal life. He keeps telling everyone like, this guy's stalking me and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, you're taking it a bit too deep, whatever. It's, you know, his wife, I think it's his wife in the film. Sorry, I haven't watched the film, in the book. She gets affected by this because Joe becomes paranoid. But when you read the book, because this happened after a tragic hot air balloon accident, it can be seen as like his interpretation of like PTSD, where he's interpreting this a bit differently, and so his interpretation, his POV in the book itself can be corrupted. That's the analogy I'm trying to bring towards now. Ski Jet's interpretation, and a valid interpretation, which I think I also agree with this, so I'm going to claim it as well now as my interpretation, because I agree now, and I've changed my initial thought that it doesn't matter who was casted as Athena in this context, because the Odysseus' subconscious mind, as like surviving essentially what is genuinely diagnosed as PTSD, his perception is corrupted because it's his way of dealing with guilt. So it could have been anyone to be Athena. And even in the film, she is not a figure that is presented to everyone else. It's only just to Odysseus. So with that logic in mind, Odysseus' interpretation to Athena is never going to be as accurate as the text, just like your interpretation of Harry Potter, when you're reading Harry Potter, is never going to be the exact same as J.K. Rowling's imagination, right? It's going to be like, yeah, okay, white guy, black hair, and glasses, but this is beyond that. This is symbolic, right? And that guilt that Odysseus has is in association with that particular woman that died, and she just happened to have features and look like Zendaya. Do I still think Zendaya was right to be casted? My only reluctance for fully being like, oh yeah, because I agree with this, you know, I'm fully reverting to what I've said, is that, did Greeks look like Zendaya? And because we've just looked in that, like, they had olive skin tone. Zendaya isn't fully black, she has olive skin tone and dark hair. She in particular fits that standard? Like, as a Greek person, not as Athena, because she was never meant to be the Athena, right? Also, like, this look here was so beautiful. Like, oh my, she looks stunning there. Okay, so I agree that that's not a massive problem to me, but I will still defend and say it would have been nice to have at least some Greek representation in the film, if you're going to have actors saying, yeah, we are the Greeks. So Himesh Patel, I'm not fully hating on him or anything like that, but I do disagree. I do disagree with having, and I you know, I come from South Asian heritage. Like, I'm not self-hating, and I'm not just being biased for the sake of it. I disagree with the casting choice. Brilliant actor, by the way. Like, this is not to critique his performance and stuff. It's just this casting choice, I'm not too sure. Unless there's evidence that Greeks had heavy black beards like his did and were as dark as him, then I'm wrong and I'll take that back. But I'm not finding like conclusive evidence. Oh, let's go back to what this does say actually. Okay, so this confirms what my opinion is. Strictly in terms of ancestral and genealogical accuracy, casting Himesh Patel, a British actor of Gujarati Indian descent, to represent an ancient Greek is not historically accurate in the biological sense. So I think that was a wrong casting choice. Yes, okay, this is fictional. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but when you are like, this is what I'm saying, like, I am conflicted in that I see both ends. And I think Helen of Troy, I understand being completely different and being that beauty and icon, as, you know, especially if Ethiopians were seen as like, and the idea of Helen of Troy is this romanticized, idealized woman. So she has to be out of this world, out of the Greeks' world. Makes sense. This one doesn't make sense to me. I think it really did stand out to me when I think his line was like, yeah, we are the Greeks. As if the Greeks are a fictional race. They're not. So this I disagree with. I don't know what your thoughts are in the chat. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not hating the guy. Like I said, incredible actor, but I think this was a wrong choice. Now, this is where I'm like, okay, this is towards like woke ideology or leftist, in the sense of that it wasn't necessary to, like, I'm sure there are many Greek actors that they could have hired as men, or people that resemble Greek features at least, like to look like, and then represent. Because like, if let's bring it to the other side. If a white person, a European person, was recorded on camera and she's representing a story that is international, okay, it's like the Odyssey is an internationally renowned whatever, but anyway, I'm digressing on that. If a white person takes a story from, let's say, Bengali or Persian culture, and then the casting directors and producers have the responsibility for representation, and then says, that white person can say, oh, I'm Persian, oh, I'm Bengali. I wouldn't agree with that, right? So it's the same for any other like race or nationality or country or whatever, civilization or whatever, in terms of historical accuracy. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this casting choice. So yeah, and I think it's quite sad that like this man will get a lot of hate. I think, which is interesting, because I think this actor may have a discourse of getting hate with casting choices, but I don't think it's as heavily criticized as Lupita being as Helen of Troy. I don't know if that's because she's a woman. Again, not trying to push modern feminist ideologies, but like, I'm seeing a difference here. I've not been exposed to like a lot of hate on him being shown up on TikTok, but I've seen Lupita. I've seen a lot of hate towards her, and the only main difference is she's a woman, and of course she's black and a different race, but like, I'm seeing gender as a big thing here, so that's something to question. If judged by dramatic so this is an interesting conclusion, and I think this is where Gemini and Google are trying to be like, what is it, neutral about it. And I think it's fair, because there are two different judgments. If you want to judge by realism, then no, it's not accurate. And if you value representation, then that is very understandable to be upset about. If judged by dramatic adaptation and modern storytelling, so it just depends on what your views are. If you view that like you want to disband fictional stories to just be open cast, open ethnic cast, then that's a different belief. I think it's very interesting, because I understand both. Because it's like, you know, growing up, I loved Harry Potter. I remember we did like a school role play, and it was Harry Potter, and I wanted to be Hermione Granger because I loved her character. I loved everything she represented. and one of the white boys, it was essentially like a white dominated environment. I don't mean that as a bad thing, I'm just saying that was a circumstance where a boy innocently said, and it was innocent, I knew it wasn't like racially motivated, it was genuinely innocent. He was like, no offense, but you don't look like Hermione. At the time, I probably felt a bit like uncomfortable because my physical features were clearly like on the show for that. Like that's what he was focusing on as being something different. But I knew deep down like it was fair. Like there's, you know, Emma Watson's been casted. We were like, what year were we in? 5. We're like 5 films deep into the, you know, the cinema world, Order of the Phoenix or whatever. No, actually, what year were we in? Year 3, year 4, or whatever, you know. So just from my point of view, I understand that like your soul resonates with a fictional character or even real characters and you want to be like them. Even historical figures, you want to be like them. Representing them is a different boundary and I get that, but like as an artistic, like actors at the end of the day are artists. They fit in the range of artists, so when they want to pretend to and role play to be something, like that's their connection with the characters, it's an expression. So I get that there is now a modern platform where you get to be your favorite characters even if they're different races to you. I get the appeal as an actor of why you want to like express that, because it's not your physical identity that is holding you back from acting at the end of the day. To some extent, obviously you've got casting preferences and choices, but like it's your soul's desire to express that. Now this is where we can get metaphysical and spiritual about it, where we can talk about the soul and, you know, this desire for expression, whether it's in our personal lives or we then seek out role play to then essentially play it out knowing it's not real, but you enjoy the act of role play. Isn't that the essence of acting and role play in general? You know you're not that character. You know you may not look like this person or whatever it's depicted as, but you want to have the fun enjoyment of playing it. And I think a lot of people in the audience, in general modern society, do not appreciate actors' desires for expression and why they enjoy acting in the first place. Like, that's essentially like one of the main reasons, and maybe also to seek stardom and fame or whatever, but like, so I think that's a different interpretation that I'd like you guys to take away, because I also get that as well. I also respect historical accuracy and representation for race and culture where it's deserved. What outweighs the other, I am not too sure. I'm not in a position where I can answer that for myself. But I think each have their own merit to look into and really think about it. And it's like, it depends on what state of consciousness you're at as well. Again, this is a spiritual channel, so we can talk about it. Because when you're operating at lower states of consciousness, well, I tend to say lower as in more grounded to physical reality. So of course, historical accuracy will win in that argument. But then when you operate on a higher level of consciousness and you're just a soul expressing yourself in your game character, you're playing, you know, whoever you are in this lifetime, you're playing this character, right? But when you operate like, oh, we're not separated by race, nationality, whatever, like we're united by consciousness and souls, etc., then dramatic adaptations and completely different people playing these characters, you lean more towards that point of view and that perspective and opinion. So if we're really looking at it, it really is down to different, oh, you can't see the full sentence of this. It's really down to, let's get it bigger. You still can't see it. There we go. it's really down to what state of consciousness that you're at. I'm going to reiterate that again. If you're tied down to lower states of consciousness where you think this physical reality is all there is, you're going to lean to what's physically in front of you, historical accuracy, and what's literally physical in this life. If you're operating on higher levels of consciousness where you believe in souls, consciousness, divine unity, and that these physical bodies are masks, then as an artistic expression, especially from an actor's point of view, you don't encourage or really see separation by race, identity, physicalness, or historical accuracy. You just think, oh, this is all part of the matrix, the simulation, the game. What's it matter? I am enjoying the Odyssey, incredible. And these actors' souls are the ones putting the work into everything, not their physical identity associated with that. This is very deep. But I'm glad I'm raising this because that is the conclusion I am coming to from this. And I guess the whole casting. We've gone through so much in this live stream. Thank you, Sunrise in the West. And I just saw your comment, Selectivist. That's fair enough. Like, I didn't really see it as like a wrong way either. I'm just still expressing my opinions. But yeah, I do think this stream has been very thought-provoking, even for myself. Like, I've learned quite a few things. I feel like I've challenged my own ideals and have backtracked and like jumped onto different ideas. And this really helps that you guys are active in the chat and giving your thoughts, because it just really helps when you bounce ideas off of different interpretations, opinions, etc. We've come through a lot, and I think I would say throughout the stream, my state of consciousness might have like gone through different levels up and down. We're never static in one and we remain there. We're always fluctuating. And so, I've gone through historical accuracy. I've gone through the casting. I've gone through. Oh, this is the last point. Some of the controversies manufactured to try and get publicity. That doesn't surprise me. And I think sometimes causing controversies, like sometimes when you do that, it can be and you intentionally made these decisions from Christopher Nolan's point of view, potentially. It could be the fact that there's a controversy means I've provoked the right things to the right mass minds. And that can be a flex too. Yeah, I've covered specific actor reactions pretty much. Someone said she is not fitted to play a role depicted in ancient times. She looked too modern. I didn't see much hate on Charlize playing Calypso, even though she doesn't have olive skin tone and brown hair. She's a blonde woman. It's all right when it's, the other way around, I suppose. One thing I do want to say, because I haven't really spoken much about the film, so maybe shall I do a part 2? Let me know. Put in your comments if you think I should do a part 2, because I haven't really spoken about the story in itself and the journey that I wanted to give you guys in terms of my interpretation of the story in itself. I've kind of just addressed the casting, the films, the historical accuracy, the context and the background. But in terms of the story, there are some things, but it always still links back to the film because that's the only source that I've watched. So, yeah. I just want to put it out there. I think Tom Holland's character, Telemachus, I think there was a plot hole of he was obsessed with believing his dad is out there and the political stance of his mom, having to remarry and him wanting the throne, his birthright and stuff like that. He went through allegedly that journey and intensity just for Odysseus to come home and be like, yeah, I'm your dad, haven't seen you in ages, I haven't really raised you as my son, but I'm gonna go retire now and live with the love of my life and not really have a connection to my son. I think that can also be an interpretation that Telemachus in Christopher Nolan's adaptation is intentionally being seen as romanticizing a father figure that was never present, and so it's Telemachus is desire and longing for that connection that didn't happen. Also, Anne Hathaway's scene where she's like expressive about, she shows this controlled but caged rage in the fact that like if Ithaca doesn't have a king, but she's been on that throne, and just because she made a line that just because her son's starting to grow stubble, he has more of a claim on the throne than she does. And again, a lot of people diminish this as like, oh, modern feminism, but her experience is just as valuable, her knowledge. To dismiss that entirely, like I fully disagree. As a woman, you know, in pursuing, you know, intellectual studies and science, etc. So I really liked that scene of Anne Hathaway, and yeah, I think those are the last two parts. So I guess that's all I have to say in the live stream. Maybe I won't do a part 2 until I've read the book. I think that's a good like thing to promise, in the sense of I don't want to speak more until I've actually read, sorry, not the book, the poem, but it's not on my list anytime soon. Let me know what else you'd like to see on the live streams. I think it's been pretty fun, and yeah, I'm thinking, what would I do next? Maybe a Dune one. I could do so many like rabbit holes on Dune, but because I can share my screen as well, and have the opportunity to like research all these things, look at all these open tabs, you know, we can talk about anything that applies to modern world, and it doesn't have to be I'm still going to do my lecture videos, I'm still going to do my free flow talks, it's just I haven't had the time, but I've been able to block out 3 hours for this live stream in particular, to not like have to prepare and just do an all-in-one content video for you guys. But yeah, I'm waffling. Thank you so much for joining the stream, and to those that are watching it after, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all take care, and I hope you've learned something new in this stream, at least one thing.